Well, welcome back to another episode of Marcelina, my Reliance 44 sailboat refit. Well, it's been way too long since my last video, and there's so much more that's been done that I can't possibly cover it all. But I'll give you a summary of the new stuff, and we'll talk about the last couple of things needed before we head off on a nice long trip. But more on that later. First, I was foolish enough to let the boat sit all winter with some holes in the side of the coach roof. These holes were from the old Dodger snaps, and I just forgot to fill them in. But like forgetting an anniversary, there's going to be some work to make it up to her. Next, let's tackle the safety equipment. I worked with a local welder to design and manufacture a custom life raft cradle that mounts on the push bed. The cradle is hinged at the bottom and held closed by a snap shackle, and after the life raft is actually inserted into the cradle, it will be held by a hydrostatic release. So in an emergency, I can quickly drop the life raft into the water via the snap shackle, or in the worst case, should the boat sink, the hydrostatic release will deploy the life raft. The life raft itself is a Winslow 6-person offshore model. Literally the best, and unfortunately most expensive, life raft for a pleasure craft I could find. In addition to the personal locator beacon I'll wear on my life jacket, I've got a beacon for the boat. In an emergency, these devices send your exact location to a satellite and allow search and rescue services anywhere in the world to find you. There's also a ditch bag with essential supplies to make sure you and your crew are still alive if a rescue is perhaps days, or in the worst case, weeks away. As far as actual operation of Marcelina, there have been a lot of improvements. The old Autopilot that the boat came with didn't work, or at least not anymore. So I installed a new Raymarine linear drive Autopilot with the drive unit, the computer and power supply, and the control unit at the helm. An Autopilot is very helpful if you're sailing any kind of distance, but a powered unit uses a fair amount of battery juice. To avoid the power draw, I'll be adding a Hydrovane self-steering unit that operates by the wind alone, but that's something I'll work on over the winter. Speaking of battery power, I upped the house bank to 900 amp hours with 3 12-volt lithium-ion batteries that are 300 amp hours apiece. Now we'll have lots of power for operating the Autopilot, the fridge, chart plotter, and all the other regular boat stuff. But more importantly, we have spare power to share with the drive batteries. The drive batteries operate at 108 volts, so it's a little complicated getting the 12-volt house bank power over to the drive bank. But we now have, in theory, about 50% more power available to the drive batteries. But the extended range isn't the main benefit, because the drive batteries can't be charged directly by my solar panels and wind generator. I needed a way to shuffle that wind and solar power over to the drive bank. So the wind and solar fills the house bank, is converted to 110 AC power by my inverter, which then runs 2 Starlink 48-volt chargers hooked up in series to top up my 108-volt drive batteries. That means I'm completely energy self-sufficient. With 4 solar panels and a wind generator, I'm not producing a lot of power. As long as I'm not motoring and not sucking a lot of power for daily needs, I would make enough in a week or two to fill up both battery banks. I'll also probably add some kind of drag device that will produce power when I'm underway. Speaking of being underway, I've got a full suite of new sails, including an asymmetric chute with Marcelina's logo on it. I've been very pleased with the service and support I've gotten from Quantum Sails. My local rigger, Tom, has been great. He's been helping to make all the changes necessary to control those new sails and make cruising safer and easier. First, we installed Schaefer roller furlers for the Genoa and staysail. The original furler for the Genoa was well past its prime, and the previous staysail was hanked on a removable stay. There was also no provision for the staysail sheets, so I installed tracks, and Tom worked out a way to lead the sheets aft. Now I'll have a small staysail ready to deploy when things pipe up. We installed new mast tracks on the main and mizzen to help everything operate smoothly, and replaced the main boom so that we could do one-line reefing. The pneumatic vang is also new, eliminating the need for a topping lift. Finally, we ran all the important lines back to the cockpit to reduce the times when someone needs to venture forward on a pitching deck. Between the autopilot and the lines led to the cockpit, it should make it possible to single-hand this boat. You may have noticed the rectangular device sitting next to the wind generator about halfway up the mizzen mast. That's a Starlink internet dish. This dish is not designed for a moving boat, but I checked it out under sail and it works. A bit slower than when I'm sitting still, but still it works. Starlink just came out with a marine-specific setup, but at $10,000 for the hardware and $5,000 for the monthly service, I think I'll pass. I could actually completely replace my, quote, residential system every few days, and it would still be cheaper than the marine system. So anyway, as long as it works, I'll still have internet wherever I roam. I've done a lot more, from a new charger inverter to rounding off the corners of the cabinets to make bouncing around inside the boat a bit safer. But the last critical items remaining are adding one more cheek block so the main sheet is routed properly and so I can close up the ceiling in the galley, soldering a couple of connectors at the top and bottom of the mast so the radio antenna is on top of the mast where it belongs, and running the reefing lines in the boom. But let's do some sailing. In just a couple of days, I'm heading west from Rochester, New York on Lake Ontario, through the Welland Canal to Lake Erie, up the Detroit River and St. Clair Rivers to Lake Huron, and, if the wind gods are smiling, up the St. Mary's River to Lake Superior. It will be a shakedown cruise just shy of 2 months to see how everything works, what needs to be done differently or needs fixing, and perhaps what performs as planned. But that'll be the next video. See you again soon.